So let's share a cup of morning coffee and talk about the company that is called Volkswagen, VW. Pride, jewel of the German fatherland, and perhaps one of the greatest peak industrial 3.0 companies. Because my gosh, are they in trouble today? And Volkswagen is the second largest producer in the cars in the world, behind Toyota, and it's facing really a catastrophic crisis because recently, towards the end of 2024, it was discussing for the first time in history shutting down factories in Germany. And I'm German, grew up in London, but I do have a German passport and a proud German citizen. But it's been kind of with sadness that I've been watching the decay and stagnation that's been creeping into that organization over many years now. What we're seeing now is the culmination of all that stagnation, arrogance, ignorance, complacency, delusion, and decay, culminating in what I think very likely will lead to the death of this once great organization. It's a big thing to say and it's a big thing to call, but I do think that there's a very serious possibility that by 2030 that Volkswagen will have declared bankruptcy and will be a shadow of its former self. Why do I think that? Well, the world has just moved on. The world has just moved on. The future of the car is being built in China today. The Chinese car market is larger than the American and European car markets combined. Chinese EVs are far superior to anything that Volkswagen is producing. Volkswagen can't even produce its own automobile software. It spent billions trying to be able to produce software that was effective and functional, and recently wrote it off and abandoned the whole project because it just cannot get its act together. It's just embarrassing. And furthermore, it's not very well known, but the largest corporate debt currently on the planet is Volkswagen. They have 200 billion euros of debt. How on earth are you going to pay back 200 billion euros of debt when your revenue is collapsing, your growth markets are collapsing, and your core markets are collapsing? Because peak revenue and profitability for Volkswagen is in China. That's where they make their money. And the one thing that Chinese consumers today are not interested in buying are European ICE automobiles, internal combustion engines. Chinese consumers are buying Chinese EVs because they are awesome. They are fantastic. And that's just the straightforward truth. If you compare a Chinese EV to a European EV, it is superior in price, it is superior in quality, it is superior in speed, it's just better all around. And what they have done is they have essentially learned from Volkswagen and been able to become better. The student has now beaten the master and the tables have turned. So Volkswagen has lost its strategic initiative, it's lost its ability to be dominant in its core markets, and and there's more to it at a structural level. If we think about it, I think one of the things that's so admirable about what China and Chinese companies have done is how much they have learned from Europeans and the Americans, right? Inviting the factories into China, listening, learning. How many Chinese have learned to speak German, have learned to go out and understand what is powerful about German engineering and the way in which we approach building cars, versus how many Germans have gone over to China to learn Chinese and bring the knowledge the reverse way. If you think about it in terms of flow, much more is flowing from Germany to China in terms of knowledge and capability than the other way around. So there's just a profound sense of ignorance. There's also a profound sense of being very straightforward about this, of arrogance. The Germans are just far too arrogant. They just they just cannot comprehend how advanced China has become. It's difficult to explain to them because they also refuse to go see it themselves, right? There's almost this sort of sense that China is still somehow this sort of third world nation, which is just absolutely not true in any way, shape or form. It's one of the most advanced technological societies on earth these days. And if you don't believe that, go visit China and see it for yourself. So there's this ignorance, there's this arrogance, and there's also a sense of complacency. One of the things I'd like to remind people when I do my case studies with them is that Nokia's peak year of revenue was Q2 2009, and it was sold for pennies on the dollar to Microsoft in 2013. That's 4 years, that's 16 quarters. That's 16 quarters from peak to bottom. That's how fast it goes down. And if you're making strategy and you're responding at a rate of change of one meeting, one big AGM a year, it's just going to be too little too late, right? You're out by an order of magnitude or two how fast you need to be doing. So there's a great complacency there, and there's a sense of, I can understand the situation for the industrial workers in Germany because they want to fight for their high wages, they want to fight for their reasonable labor markets, but the average German working week has become 34 hours a week. Other people are just working harder, notably in China, right? They're working harder and doing more. So you're asking for too much money, you're working too little, you're producing inferior products, right? It's just not going to work. There's a delusional approach to strategy, which is just mind-boggling, and how they go about creating new kind of platforms, new kind of products. There is a real challenge around innovation. It just seems to be that they kind of thought, we'll just take EVs and we'll just take the traditional cars and just make it an EV. And you can see, I think, when I realized one of the fundamental limitations about the German mindset around technology is they just don't get it. They don't get this new digital age. And I think that's where one of the great examples I want to give for that is how many people sit in their nice Mercedes, their nice BMW, their nice Audi, Volkswagen, or whatever it is, and you have this sort of nearly $1,000 smartphone, you have this very expensive car, and you have this shitty little $20 device that you plug into your air vent or try to stick to your screen to try and hold this phone, and you have this cable running into the cigarette lighter. It's just ridiculous, right? And absolutely, and the German design around how you build a car to integrate this critical feature of Industry 4.0, the smartphone that we all carry, just isn't there. It's just a stubborn refusal to do it. Whereas when you get into a Chinese EV, the first thing you see sitting in the tray where normally the gearbox would be, but of course it's an EV, so there's no gearbox, that's usually two smooth Qi chargers where you have instant wireless charging. The phone is designed sort of at the center of the experience. The screens are elegantly designed. I got into the X-Pen G6 really, and it's just beautiful how they do it compared to the laggy, crappy phone screens that you often see on the German manufacturers. So there's just a stubborn refusal to embrace digitalization. And indeed, one of the shocking statistics I read recently from the OECD is that Germany only has 11% penetration of fiber optic. I mean, you're running the country on copper wires in 2025. It's just hard to explain how far behind the fatherland has fallen. Of course, there's always niche examples you can give, and perhaps some people will point out to me all these technology companies that are successful in Germany, and they are indeed there. But it's not happening at a sufficient scale. Germany has fallen and it continues to fall behind on the technological frontier. It is not at the edge. Where are the German AI companies? Where are the German EV companies that matter significantly at scale? Where are the German phone manufacturers? Where are the German digital companies? They don't exist. They don't exist. We have completely missed the boat to Industry 4.0. And sort of at a larger sweep here, but I won't go into too much on this particular conversation, but essentially digitalization is a form of 21st century colonization, and what we are seeing is the reverse colonization. That the East is coming back for the West, right? And it's coming back having learned the lessons of the past, and has now been able to generate a superior capability. I was in Vietnam at the end of last year for Christmas with my family, and I got to sit in some of the VinFast cars, the Vietnamese EV manufacturer. Now, before I've been a bit snobby about it and probably a bit arrogant and dismissing it, but when I sat in it, I was amazed. Beautiful car, rode very smoothly. The pricing point seemed fair, and they're everywhere. If you're Vietnamese now, you're not buying BMWs, you're buying the latest version of the VinFast car, right? And Vietnam is a country of 100 million people. That's 100 million people. Germany is only 70 million people, 80 million people, right? And these Vietnamese are definitely working harder. They're very clever. They are really ambitious, and they're very driven in embracing this new technological frontier. Whereas Germany is just being left in the dust. If you ask me, VinFast versus Volkswagen, VinFast, certainly when it comes to winning in the EV war, I would put my money on VinFast in the next 5 to 10 years. Those guys definitely have a much higher chance of success. But perhaps the greatest thing of all that really corrupted the once great organization of Volkswagen is the fifth demon of stagnation, which is decay. And decay is always the hardest one because that's where you get to the heart of the nastiness, right? The moral and ethical collapse. The failure of governance to build a better world because it becomes hijacked by self-interests that are trivial in the end, and actually resulted in criminality, right? The former CEO of Germany is on charges in America, and the American Department of Justice is trying to extradite him from Germany to face trial in America for what he did with the Dieselgate scandal, in which Volkswagen lied to the world about its emissions. It basically said its emissions only produce a small amount of pollution, of carbon and other things, and in fact they just lied, and they produced not 10% more, but like 10x or 100x more pollution. It's just outrageous, and the whole thing is just so stupid. I mean, what were these idiots thinking? I mean, it's just so embarrassing to think that these clowns were allowed to lead the greatest company in Germany. How did these incompetent fools come to lead an organization to the point where Volkswagen has faced over $30 billion in fines? It has had to recall millions of cars. Its senior leadership are being sued and jailed by governments around the world. And not only that, but it cost us the technological edge. Rather than doing all these shenanigans, we should have doubled down on EVs and try to compete with China and try to stay ahead of them. But we didn't. We didn't. Instead, we were led into the darkness of decay by these incompetent managers. I still, at best they're just clowns, at worst they're criminals, but the whole thing is just a farce. And I think it just goes to show the deep level of decay that had arrived, where that spirit of innovation, that spirit of a drive to build a better world, fundamentally failed. And what's worst of all about it is that at least if you've been able to make money, you would have been successful. But they didn't. They just obliterated shareholder value. So it's like letting the little boys try and run the big serious thing, and they run this little club to enrich themselves, but in the end they've just absolutely fucked everything. And as a result, Volkswagen is in absolute peril right now, and there is a major risk that it will default and collapse in the next 5 years. I personally don't see how they're going to figure it out. I really hope that they do, but it makes me very, very sad to see how the demons of stagnation, ignorance, arrogance, complacency, delusion, decay have destroyed this once great company, and the consequences of that will ripple out throughout the fatherland, that is Germany, throughout Europe and throughout the world, will be significant and substantial. Thanks for joining me for this cup of coffee. I hope that you have a great day, and see you soon.